sort of.
No, you have to.
I have to.
Yeah, 30 minutes.
What's it? Whoa. Ben, moi.
So.
Look. Hi, my name is Ben. I'm gonna put this behind here because it's going to distract me. The ticking, it's like, hurry up. I'm from Australia, and I studied in the Netherlands for the last 2 years. And before I get started, I'd like to invite you to my cropped presentation. Now, the reason I'm in Lisbon is because I'm doing a project with the architecture training, which is on at the moment, and where I'm doing runs in the morning at 7:30. If you'd like to come, I have some people who came on the 2 days ago. Yeah. And it was did you have a good time?
You should try it. It's really good.
Okay. But maybe not tomorrow morning, because I've heard there's a public transport strike. Yeah. So I might not be there. I'll see how we go.
So just run.
Yeah. So we run from in the morning through different areas.
Where do you start?
At in Rossio, in the square at the North Fountain.
Okay.
And I think every day until the 11th. So I'm getting up early tomorrow, so you should too. But my presentation, which might be cropped in different parts, is through my my thesis, which I did over the last year. At the end of it, I came up with this kind of role of the radical political designer. And I'm not quite sure whether I'm achieving this or where I am sitting within this term at the moment, but it's something I'm kind of going towards, and maybe you can help me or tell me what you feel about it. Because I felt like design in the school that I was in the profession that I was really about objects a lot. And I think design is moving a lot towards people and our kind of society. So I'm going to unpack this term, and then I will this phrase, and then I will go and show you what I did in the last year and some other projects, and then maybe we can talk about how this is coming about. So designer, you probably maybe is clear, but then let's go to radical and political. Interestingly, you can't see it on here, but just recently, the school that we're at in the Netherlands put me and some other students under the title of critical design activists. So maybe that's another term that we could say. So for the moment, I think there's a lot of systems that are breaking down in Europe in general, and we hear a lot about financial crisis, and it affects us in different ways. And there was this artist's name is Jan van Heeswijk. This is part of my thesis where I kind of pretended I had different newspaper articles. But she had this quote, which was, now that all the systems are breaking, now is the time to act. So if we think about this thing of systems are in trouble or changing or breaking in certain ways, then now is the time to do things about it. I'm maybe more interested in design. I think design has this reputation of being something that solves problems, that helps things, that comes towards solutions for deep-seated problems either in society or this kind of thing, or we make nice things that can go in your homes, sort of more styling. And maybe I'm more interested in design that provokes change rather than necessarily helps, or maybe it helps through provocation. And this could be a form of what is known as critical design, which is maybe making things that are more difficult or disturbing in order to make change. And people who are kind of behind critical design are Jin and Raby, who are teachers in the RCA in London, and they say critical design uses speculative design proposals to challenge narrow assumptions, preconceptions, and givens about the role that products play in everyday life. But for me, I'm not so interested in necessarily products, because I think that's a narrow vision of what design can be, and maybe I'm also interested in creating situations or projects or things like this that people can take part in. And my background is in theatre as well, so I'm interested in things that people can be a part of. So that's maybe the radical part, is doing things that are outside of the the design profession as we know it, and maybe also pushing past the, I don't know, what is expected of designers, or doing things which are more difficult perhaps. And for the political term, I think we're seeing a lot of changes in Europe at the moment and throughout the world. Political changes where people maybe become more involved in their governments, or can't, so they try to be, in the last 5 years, maybe more. And I have this theory that all design is political, because I think it changes. Design is a sort of unremovable part of our lives and part of our society now. It's something that is called upon to fix all kinds of wicked problems. Something that we kind of avoid. We all live with it now, whether we buy it or whether it's part of our jobs. Or, but I think it always forces us into a certain position or a certain. It makes us do certain things, and whether that's through the way that it's made or the way that it's distributed or its intentions for how it's used. I mean, you could also maybe say that it's ethical in some way. This is really cut off. But so I ran this. A lot of text that you can't read. I ran this a session at a conference called What Design Can Do in Amsterdam, and what we said about design was, in terms of its political role, is that it does not have, not only have a political impact on society, initiated by its creators, but to the same extent by its consumers. Market logic directs the success of individual designs. Consumption has.
Sorry, but you say that all design is political. Name an example. I mean, of an everyday object or something that is.
Okay. Well, if you take IKEA, for instance. It's democratized a lot the way that people can access products, and yet it has produced these production methods that we don't see, that they're made in China or whatever, that takes part in encouraging people to work in factories in this way, and yet it makes, in some ways it's a democratization of design, that people can access good design and have. I'm sure there's something from IKEA in here. I think probably that bookshelf. And yeah, I guess it makes it accessible, but it also means that maybe there's less independent designers who have access to markets, and it makes things cheaper.
But why is that political?
Why is that political?
Because of what he said.
But
All that he said affects the social life of the world, of the people.
okay, in that way, okay, design is political, but everything else is political. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true as well, but what I'm trying to say is that by designing something you can't be apolitical, because whatever you do you will always have an impact.
Yes, of course.
And I think political is a difficult word because everything is political in this sense, but you could use other words like ethical or, but that's, if I go, so this is part of my my thesis. I was just trying to explain this a bit more. Part of my thesis where I said that all design is political. So whatever we do, we're always adding to. I mean, unless you maybe design it for yourself and you don't send it out into the world, then it can be completely removed from the rest of the world. But if you show it to other people and other people use it, then you will be informing their lives in some way. And I think that there is design which recognises its political position and includes this as a feature. So something, I'll show you something later that people say, yeah, I recognise that this design is political, and I will make this almost what you came up with before when we were talking about the posters in the windows from demonstrations where people express what they feel and put in the window of their home. If you created this system, then that would be you would be recognising that you're having a political system. You're creating a political design. I said there's design which it has kind of political parties as its clients. There's a group in the Netherlands called Tonic who redesigned I think it's the Socialist Party logo as a tomato, because I said the tomato is the humble fruit. This is Yeah, I think there's also maybe design that is more tactical in the political sense, that it creates situations or is maybe less planned in some way. And maybe there's also the rest of design. So there's 4 groups, and the last group is that which doesn't necessarily claim to be political but can't avoid it, like IKEA or like someone who creates a water bottle, but in doing this means that we buy less, maybe we're buying less bottled water or this kind of thing. And I came to this kind of text at the end of my thesis, which I called Design in Crisis, because as I said, I thought that economic crisis, whether it's true or not, or whether who is behind it, is one of the foremost factors which is changing the way that society is running at the moment. And I really recognize that the word crisis itself is something which has really become part of our language over the last, well, probably since 2007. And so I wanted to use it with a K, so I'm kind of recognizing that I am part of this, but also somehow against it. I think I'm going to show you a video. I think just the sound.
Yeah, but you just...
They're here, the trucks that leave all others behind. Brand new 59 Ford. Ford-word in modern design and Ford-word for safety.
In its recent history, design was ultimately linked to making and selling stuff. Over the past 100 years, design contributed to unsustainable growth by building objects and a desire for them. In the current economic crisis, there is less need for things and a greater need for thinking, ultimately developing new systems.
In my job, if I don't do things right, I would be fired. What are you doing sitting there? All of you have to change.
Designers can help communities and institutions from succumbing to the culture of crisis, which pervades our media.
I'm here today to talk about a crisis unlike we've ever known. A home mortgage crisis, personal experiences of this crisis. While this crisis is vast to escape this crisis.
So in this speech he said crisis, I think 29 times or something like this. So I was talking about the culture of crisis and how this is changing the way we live. And this is what was interesting before about what you were talking about, putting the political messages in the windows. Because one of my inspirations for the work that I did this year were these banners which were made for Occupy movements. And I was seeing how this expression of difficulty in people's lives or the way that they were not represented allowed people to express their difficulties in a very public way. It's unfortunate you can't see all of them here, but there's a whole, I have a whole collection of these signs which I took from photos and then kind of decontextualized. And the thing that I think that is important here is the moment when people get a piece of cardboard and a pen or a paint and they write what they feel and then they stand with it on the street. Actually, I'm just going to see if... Oh God. They stand with it on the street and they stand with it on the street in the way that shows what they believe. And I think that that's a bit of a change to the way it's been for a while. So this is a bit better actually. So for my thesis through the year, this is kind of like the theoretical part, and now for the thesis I felt like I needed to apply this, maybe this idea of this role or this idea of design in crisis to some certain sites. So through the year I found different points where economic crisis is changing people's opinion or ideas in different sites. I said all design is political, so whatever we do we're always adding to, I mean unless you maybe design it for yourself and you don't send it out into the world, then it can be completely removed from the rest of the world. But if you show it to other people and other people use it, then you will be informing their lives in some way. And I think that there's design which recognizes its political position and includes this as a feature. So something, I'll show you something later that people say, yeah, I recognize that this design is political and I will make this almost what you came up with before when we were talking about the posters in the windows from demonstrations where people express what they feel and put in the window of their home. If you created this system, then that would be you would be recognizing that you're having a political system. You're creating a political design. I said there's design which it has kind of political parties as its client. There's a group in the Netherlands called Tonic who redesigned I think it's the Socialist Party logo as a tomato, because I said the tomato is the humble fruit. This is the, yeah, I think there's also maybe design that is more tactical in the political sense, that it creates situations or including like this kind of thing is engaging new publics or engaging people in a different way in their own environment and on their own terms. And I presented this back to the library, and they are kind of taking some of these forward, and they can't do necessarily all of these things because they live in this, or they work in this incredible bureaucracy. But that is also one important thing for me working in this way, is that I'm outside of this bureaucracy, that I can work dynamically and out of the restrictions that are placed on people in these systems.
It's gotta be heavy, though.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid to carry it on your back. But it's kind of symbolic as well.
Did people use it?
Yeah, people were interested in it, but actually, because of the bureaucracy of the library, I couldn't lend them out because I couldn't scan them and say all of this stuff. So that was a bit disappointing. And I could show a lot more films about these kind of strategies that are developed for the library. And these things were often objects, but they had a kind of a reason around them, or they were explained in a film or an animation or something like this. Excuse me. So in the second.
Are these films possible scenarios for the financial cuts, or it's experiments, or how do you see these
Objects.
objects?
The films.
Or the films that you made?
I think when the library lost its budget, they were really paralysed by the fact that they would have to get rid of a huge amount of their books. And for them, books define what a library is. And yet, they had this really great text which said, yeah, a library is a social space, is a place where people can gather and learn, and basically the core of their practice is around knowledge and literacy. And so by stepping outside of their restrictions of what a library had to be, I created new ideas of what they could be. I mean, in some ways it's not that new, because there are other libraries developing other things like this. So it gave them some sense of freedom, I guess, to think that they could work in a different way. But because of their ongoing restrictions, like that they have the people that fund them, or the other groups in the city have responsibilities for these different things, like either art or knowledge in public space, that they can't do these kind of things, like the mobile library. They won't be allowed to do that. So in some ways they're not that helpful, because they don't sit within the restrictions that the library has, but in other ways they inspire them to, or they can follow these things through in a different way. Does that answer?
Yes.
Yeah. Right, there's a bit. In the second trimester, so it was split up into 3 areas, I went to another site, which was the factory in Genk, which will lose about 15,000 jobs in one place. And so again, I worked in, I guess, I worked in this area with these people who only have very specific tasks in the factory, like they get a car door and put it there and then screw it on. They get a car door and put it there and then screw it on. do this again and again. And all of the people I talked to thought that they actually would find it really difficult to do this repetitive job. That we're used to, or we like to think that we could work in either a creative field or in a research field where we do things, we develop our own ideas and we do new things every day. But to do this 8 hours a day where you have a 4-minute cycle of the same thing that you do is somewhat of a nightmare to a lot of people. And yet, because of our population and our economy, this kind of thing, that these kind of things for the moment will kind of need to continue to some extent. And so I basically developed ways that this forwardist mode of production could combine with new forms of education to work in different sectors. So for instance, in Belgium there's a huge need for elderly care, and yet there are a lot of people who are not well trained enough. In this area that the Ford factory closed, for the next cycle of nursing training, they had a 4,000 or 5,000% increase in the number of people who wanted to be nurses. So I was trying to see how this system could employ more people and also make it more efficient in some way. In some way, a sort of a satirical way as well. So in this sense, I was trying to find how people could be trained as nurses who have a specific task, like taking blood or giving medicine or delivering sort of needs like this, and it could be sort of factoryized in a weird way, which is maybe not so positive, or maybe it's a bit dystopic, but I think it's important to think where these people will start to work. And I kind of created different scenarios. I guess this is just one of those. And I left, and I'd also talked to politicians and I know people from the factory and the union, who else? Yeah, from this area, and tried to figure out how new designs for these systems could work in this area. But again, I think there's this limit in bureaucracy where things take a lot longer than you expect them to. And they will be working out what these people will work at for the next kind of 5 to 10 years. Okay, so the last scenario that I was working in was this. I was looking at trust and financial markets, the way that no one really trusts their banks anymore because they've completely screwed us all over. And so I found it very difficult to break out of. In all of these, I found it difficult to break out of the reality that was present. And so in the library, I tried to kind of get out on the street and create new things. And in this section, I was looking at new possible futures for finance. So I made this newspaper, which looked at, I guess, different scenarios in the future about how finance and trust would interrelate. And there's all of these new, incredible systems which are kind of just starting at the moment to do with finance and trust, which are, for me, change the way we fundamentally deal with both money and each other. For instance, there's these peer-to-peer banks online, which mean that you can lend money from person to person. And initially I thought that this was kind of wouldn't really work because I want to borrow I don't know, 100,000 euros for a house, but I can't find someone else who wants to lend it to me. But it's distributed, and people have different credit ratings, and it's possible to do this without this kind of this hierarchical intermediary of a bank. And this also changes the way that we trust each other, because it means that if I'm going to lend you this amount of money, I need to know whether I can rely on you or not. And so there are new ways that the trust is evolving. For instance, in eBay, when you have a credit rating, people are really careful of the fact that they have a 5-star rating. They really protect it at all costs. And there are companies which are transferring this trust in eBay or Airbnb or, I don't know, different online groups like this, websites like this, and transferring that into how much you can trust someone if you lend them money. Additionally, I was looking at new changes in Europe in different ways that countries are dealing with their debt and how that changes the way that, I guess, financial systems work in that country. But I guess through all of these three systems, maybe I didn't. This is the problem that I'm having now. In my own realization that maybe I didn't change that much. Maybe I didn't come up with that many new things, or maybe I didn't get it to the right people. So I guess I'm trying to think of ways that I can make this.
You tried all of this in Eindhoven?
Yes.
Yes. During the
year.
During the year. Okay. And when you were in Australia, did you have this idea of working in design and thinking of design throughout political? With this idea of political design and this idea of crisis. Was
not so much.
Not so much. So
yeah, but also because it's not.
Were you just surfing in Australia?
No. But Australia has had 22 years of economic growth.
Yes. No.
So there's no. People are very.
No, that's why I think it's at the same time it's interesting that you left Australia and then
he focused on this.
No, and you have I mean perhaps not a bit of a shock, but a huge change of.
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely a huge change because I feel like in the media and in politics most of the conversation is about economics. It's not about values and in Australia, what is it about? It's about sport and...
But even in Germany, the people in Germany doesn't have a clue what's happening in Portugal, in Greece, in Italy, in Spain. They don't know at all. They have a twisted idea that we are sucking them, you know.
I'm not so sure.
Yeah,
honestly, I'm not
German guy
sure also.
Christine, what do you think?
I'm not sure as well. That's good.
There's another German guy somewhere. Anyway, yeah, I'm not...
Because it's like, in each country you are, the news are adjusted, you know? So it's kind of difficult to have one view of one thing only, you know? So in Australia, of course, they don't debate the problems in Europe and the debt crisis and the mortgage crisis because they don't have the crisis. You know?
Yeah, well, if you want to talk about Australia, it's interesting because the government did very well in coping with which could have been an economic crisis there, but they weren't given credit for it. So they actually avoided a debt crisis in Australia through stimulus packages and other things. And also the fact that we have a lot of resources that we dig out of the ground and some for China. That's kind of a bit, that's slowing now. But it's interesting what you said about coming here because when I was in Australia, we would have a lot of students, particularly from Korea and China, and they would work for. We would have a semester of 3 months, and the first 2 months they wouldn't really know what this is a generalization. But the first 2 months they wouldn't know what to do, and the last month they would say, "Okay, I'm going to work on a rethinking of the tea ceremony." And for me, that was really reflecting back on something from their own culture and something from home, which is fine, but it's impossible to see how it's relevant to Australia, really. But for me, I was really interested in diving into this context here and seeing what either I could do or contribute or discover or see in a new way. And that's why I looked at this kind of contemporary context so specifically.
In this last project, what was your approach? Redesign this newspaper, or what
So this
was the goal?
This was a newspaper which explored new modes of financial institutions and trust.
Yeah.
So, for instance, financial institutions used to have strong ethical codes, which have been completely really, and because they were also.
How many years ago?
Yeah. No, but I see that there's also this return to ethical banks. mostly well, my research was also based in Netherlands, but also I can see a lot in the north of Europe. There's this Dutch bank called Triodos who says we only invest in ethical projects. And we have certain criteria about what makes it an ethical project. But actually now they've run out of projects which fit their criteria. So they have more people coming to them saying, yeah, we want to be part of this. We want to give you our money. We want to put our money in your bank because it's, we want to support banks that do good work. And yet, end of the story. No, and yet they can't find ways to invest it. Or there's a bank in
But that's
North.
impossible.
That's impossible.
How can they not find ethical
Projects.
That's people supporting, thinking
Has
that
to
they
give
are
you return
supporting
also.
something. It's like I think now you cannot rely exactly on what to support. I mean, I would, if I could support something, a social cause. For example, I don't rely almost in anything, you know, and this bank is also the same. I would never rely on that, and it's how come they not find ethical things to
I think they had to change their criteria for what was ethical, and they also had a certain percentage of, because of also it has to be a reliable investment, so they couldn't have. I think the thing was that they had a lot of organic biological farmers who wanted to have loans, which qualified for an ethical investment, and yet they didn't want to have more than a certain percentage of their investments going to agriculture because it could also fail. Because it's, so I think that they changed that. But maybe another model that was interesting that I found was in Germany there was a bank that gives 0% interest. So you can put your money in there and you don't get any, your money doesn't grow. Which I think,
Yes, no, that is interesting. But I was talking to some guy the other day that he was saying to me something that was a bit like that, which was China doesn't have that. Yes, doesn't have any that. So what is going to happen in the future is that you are going to give. This can happen. You are going to give them your money with a negative percentage. I mean, they will say we'll keep a percentage of this, but it will be safe, so you won't lose your money. Not now if you're.
At least you'll
Yeah, I
keep
know
your
you.
value.
Yes, but you will have less money, but
Okay,
it will be
that's a good
secure.
I think through all of this, so to answer your question, what I did is I created scenarios of things that would change or could change, and tried to, by showing that to people, see how they would reflect on how their values would also be adjusted to these things. Because I think when you go through these moments of crisis, you also go through these moments of change where you're willing to accept new models.
You've talked about something which interests me, which has to do with jobs with a lot of routine, like the Ford line production or something. And I once read an example of trying to create a little emotion in these kind of structures. So, for instance, in Cuba, they have these cigars factories where they put people reading good books, so people who are only doing cigars all day, but they are listening sometimes to Charles Dickens or some good author. What do you think design could do for that matter? Do you think design could give something to people in these kind of jobs? Some kind of emotion, some kind of...
I think the biggest thing that I saw when I was in this, because I went to this factory where there was a strike, and so the people at the front of this place, they really enjoy their jobs. They don't see it how maybe we would see it as something that we would not want to do. But the biggest thing was the community of people there. The people that had worked there for 35 years, and they had really good friends, and that they came from the same community and worked there together. So it wasn't so much about what they were doing during the job, but that they got satisfaction from having people that they worked with, so that they were, that they had
Social life.
so a social life around that as well. Because maybe they didn't get so much satisfaction from the job itself. A lot of people said, yeah, I don't really care about the cars going out the door. I don't feel like I own them at all. There were no car fanatics. No one was. People, I said, you own a Ford, and they said, yeah, because it's cheaper. I'd prefer not to have a Ford. And maybe it was interesting there that in this protest that they were joined against the factory, but they were still together in some way. And that's also the thing I was trying to replicate in these new models that I was looking at, that there were also people in these in new industries or whatever, but they were kind of still had this kind of community effect, community gathering. Because one thing that was being proposed is that people from the town would be split up into different industries, but all away from the town, and they would all go away to smaller enterprises and then come back together. And although that splits the load in different industries, which would not potentially fail so hard as it would mean that people wouldn't have a kind of a community sense.
Just for that question. I was wondering, like, how do you see yourself? Also, the question that John asked last talk: where do you see yourself in the next?
What's the future for the radical political
design? In the next 10 years, like, so how do you see, like,
next
what
time
is your job there? Like, why are you get the money to proceed with your beliefs and to proceed your provocative approach to design?
As I say, Arthur could help me. When you were asking some shit before,
yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, you know she's gonna ask me too.
It wasn't me.
Yeah. I don't know.
Just saying, because I think almost every designer has the same issue. Like, we don't like objects. We are tired of objects. We'd rather prefer to do some other stuff, but this other stuff is not. There's not value yet there. So
I can give you a couple of examples of what I will do.
Okay.
Okay, so I will work in education. I will go back to Australia in December and I'll work in education. And then I will have small projects on the side which look at these different conditions that we take for granted, I guess, in our society. And for the moment, they are the ones that I have that are planned, are kind of funded as part of festivals or education programs. And I haven't yet kind of gone into more commercial or corporate events, and I would have to see whether I would want to do that as well, but perhaps. And so this is a sketch of it's funny, a sketch of an area with for kids and kids only, where they come together to form their idea of an ideal nation. So they're trying to come up with the values and principles, policies, whatever, for their ideal country. And this is a project that will happen over about 2 weeks in a festival in Australia, in Darwin in the north, which is quite a multicultural city. And I guess that's paid for by the festival, and it's a cultural event. Yeah, and
so we need to finish.
Yeah. There you go. Cultural event.
in Rosa, so
We'll be back.
we'll be back. Join